Testing. Hello, everyone. Welcome to XYZ Podcast. So this is the second episode of this year, what I released. And welcome and thanks a lot for your support. My name is Gary, and today we have Jeffrey Cheah. So when I told a lot of friends that I'm gonna have an interview with Jeffrey Cheah, a lot of people thought it's the Sunway corporate one, but it's not. But today I'm gonna very glad to know Jeffrey. I think because somehow we met because of the crit session at UCSI, through our mutual friend Nicholas Ng as well, and then I think Jeffrey's work sort of I came across because he gave a sharing session in Taylor's Tea Time. So that's another session where you can actually look up for more on YouTube, where bunch of information there about these two coming projects that we are going to talk about. And so in a way, I think today's interview session is kind of further discuss about these projects. But at the same time, Jeffrey has embarked into his own journey in Malaysia as well. Yeah, he started off his own firm and then sort of settled down in Malaysia. So I think there are certain aspects that I think as someone, myself, quite interested in business and also architectural entrepreneurship. So today I think pretty much about that. But of course, at the same time, we can talk about some philosophy. I think when it comes to the word community, that's going to be quite a key word for today's discussion. So without further ado, hi, Jeffrey. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi everyone.
Hope you are doing well.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can start off with, how would you like to introduce yourself? Because I think, as many people think that, architects wear different kind of hats. So how would you like to introduce yourself as an architect, and also at the same time you work on the urban planning as well, master plan, maybe a little bit landscape. I'm not very sure about that.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Jeffrey Cheah. Thank you, Gary, for the invitation to have this sharing. So basically, I wouldn't consider myself as a fully architect. Also, I'm considering myself as a dreamer, because I always like to daydream, but with action, of course. So just a little bit of information about my background. I started practicing architecture way back in 2016. At the time I was just graduated from Taylor's University. So even though before I graduated, I already started some project, like some renovation project. Okay, so also at first I just started with some freelance and then joined an architecture firm based in Johor. After which I did my master in Hochschule and Hart, Bauhaus in Germany. Straight after that, I moved to Manila, Philippines, and joined the WTA Architecture Design Studio as a senior architect for roughly about 2 years. Yeah. So just in 2021, last year, I shifted back to Malaysia and joined DC Architect as a project architect, and I founded my own architecture firm, Bridgeway Design Studio, with a friend. So we started the main intention we started the company, the firm, is we wanted to start to working on more experimental project and looking for more that could have social impact and try to engage with the community. So that's the main intention. We want to try. So it's like how do you learn, and then how do you get feedback from the society is by doing mistake, but those mistakes should be acceptable.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So you
yeah,
I think that's quite interesting, because I think for lots of young architectural students, they might come across where study architecture doesn't mean that always everyone wanted to be an architect, but there is also the exposure allows you to know that what you wanted to do and what you don't want to do. I think in this case, you also work, so you have a working experience before part 2 in a way. So after part 1, before part 2. So how does that help in, identify your direction much more better, where, what kind of projects or what kind of practice you are interested in? Especially for the students, I'm sure that must be very helpful for that in that case. So maybe you can share how does that working experience help you to identify the direction much more clearer in a way?
Actually, I think once you finish your bachelor, like me, I mean, also for most of us, we are somehow lost. We don't know which direction should we go, which philosophy should we follow. So all these things you should really by doing it, by experiencing it. So I mean, like once you graduated, you don't want, okay, all of us is the same. So the most important thing is to find a leader which you think you can learn from them, and then try to understand their philosophy. I mean, in the way, why would I open a firm is because that in Malaysia, at least for me, we don't have much opportunity to test our own idea in a certain company, because they will restrict you or limit your imagination, because in a certain scale of company, they need to be sustainable.
Yeah.
I mean, at least financially.
Yeah.
So you were getting a lot of project like mass production, which is not which is not that fun in a way. It could be fun, but then mass production is usually you
Like
cannot cater for
bread and butter project, yeah.
yes, you cannot cater for everyone's favor.
Mm.
So I think it's nice for you to go to different country or any part of the world to experience their culture, the reason why would they do it and design in such a way. There's also always a reason behind it.
Yeah.
So you just have to understand it and then learn from the leader. And then I think you will somehow, in a way, find out your own philosophy, which path you want to go or pursue.
Yeah. So you work in both small and big practices as well.
Yeah, yes. So for the big company, you need to also know how to learn their business side. How do they manage a company? Whereas for the small one, you can actually learn from zero.
Yeah.
And then until the project is finished. So it's a two different approach for you to for your journey, for your architecture journey.
But okay, so you're talking about the working experience in practice as well. So you work in a small practice before you do your part two. So that was in Johor. So you are from Johor.
I'm from Ipoh, actually.
You're from Ipoh. That's interesting. So how was childhood like, in a way, like, because you were talking about this kind of idea of exposure into architecture, which I'm quite interested. Like, is there any other path that you considered before taking into architecture? I mean, so you did your degree in tailors, isn't it?
Yeah. So to be frankly, before SPM, which is when I was 17, I know nothing about architecture. Nothing at all.
Neither of your family member is architect also.
None, but then they are in the kind of similar background. So actually, I was born in a family of building contractors, including my grandfather, my father, and my uncles. So my whole family tree is about construction
industry,
about building, but none of them are architects. Okay, so and the story of it is actually I never met my grandfather. So because he passed away when my father was just 10 years old.
Right.
And then when he passed away, he left nothing but just tools. So they will be just hammer, saw, and others too, like screwdriver or anything. So each of his son have to pick one.
Oh.
And then there's nothing else to share, just tools. Okay, so life was tough back then. And then like old time, all my uncle and my father without like a formal education. The only way is through their physical. They need to earn money through their physical strength.
Yeah.
So my father, like he don't have proper communication, and then his language or communication skill is not that good as well. He just know how to speak Cantonese and Chinese. So what he did the best is actually he used physical strength and stamina, and also coordination, dexterity, mechanical acumen. And it turns out the innate ability to solve the complex geometry problem in his mind. So it's through the experience and the journey. So actually this has given me a special relationship with the art of doing, because I always love to going to building site with my father and seeing things grow from nothing and each created by the hand of arm,
Yeah.
So of course, when I was a kid, or I will for sure will complain, why all my friends will have a holiday and me staying at the site,
So you actually
spending
follow
time.
your
Yeah,
father to the site and look at
yeah.
things and work. Okay.
I mean, since when I was 12, yeah, I don't have a school holiday. I always have to follow my dad to the construction site, stay with the labor workers. I mean, like literally stay. I cannot go home. I stay and eat with them. So I spend most of the time during school holiday with them.
Do you,
So yeah,
did you actually work on construction works or much more like staying in the
yes,
office looking at
yeah.
paperworks or right?
No, we don't
So you
have
do camp
we don't have
you
office. So it's literally at the construction site.
so you okay, that's interesting. How what did you do? Like carpentry or I mean all sorts of things like from cement, concrete and all this, or bricklaying and all this.
uh, of course, bricklaying and then doing some concrete work. You need to mix a concrete, so you need to get the ratio of how to make a good concrete. But you don't know anything. Just follow orders, and then slowly you get the information. Why is it like this? You will start to think. Is it a good ratio or why is it like this? I even do a steel
Yeah.
work, and you have to tie
Rebar. Yeah.
all the rebar for the
Wow.
structure.
Wow.
Yeah, I still remember for the first time when I go to the site. The time is almost doing the finishing.
Hmm.
So I was transferring the marbles, the marbles for the staircase.
Yeah.
Once I I lift the marbles, it's broken. So you
Whoa.
will, you will start to think, why is it like this? Okay, so after you got some explanation from your father or from the labor workers, is that each of the material have their own properties, they have their
Right.
own strength.
Right.
And then the way you have to move it is you have to lay it out 90 degrees first vertically before you move to another place. So you
Mm,
cannot just bring it out flat, you will crack.
mm,
So by the time you will have a lot of information and knowledge, it's not easy.
mm,
Like you see people doing it really like take it really lightly or easily, but once you do it on hand, it's totally another story.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
That's
So that's
interesting. Yeah.
how I get more knowledge about the material, everything, because I used to work with hands, so I kind of know how to get the kind of texture or feeling or the quality of it.
Mm, mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you actually eventually come out with your own concrete recipe like Tada Ando did? he was a construction worker though, and then he come out with his own recipe on
Yeah.
like a very nice finish and different kind of proportion of aggregates, water and cement and all this.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. But in a way, I think we're gonna talk about community, but there's another keyword found is actually about assembly. So
Mm.
does that actually? I mean, you work with Epic before, isn't it?
Not really. I never work
Right.
with. Yeah.
So how does that work in? Well, now I'm quite curious. Like, how do you know Nicholas? Is it because of like assembly things as well?
Actually, he's one of my lecturer in tailors.
Oh, same
And
here.
then yeah, yeah. And then we used to have a lot of conversation back then, and then try
mm,
to talk about the ideas. And then actually I wanted to join the ethics, but
mm,
but the time, when we study, we don't really have much free time to do so.
yeah,
Yeah. And then when I got back, actually I contacted him and I want to join the epic to
yeah.
build structure. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I
it was
always thought,
slowly.
yeah, I always thought you were part of it in a way, given the fact that you also, share a very interesting sign from your family background. I think, that's pretty much like, what you would do as a student. Then you were so curious about things and you would just do fun things. I just now
Mm-mm.
have a very, very short question where, because you mentioned about your family was contractor. So do you mind if I ask which building maybe in Ipoh, some project in Ipoh, like is there any particular project that you remember? Is it
Yes. There's one. If you remember, the Kinta City.
Kinta City? Yeah.
Kinder City beside that is a supermarket. I mean, it's not a supermarket. It's a wet market.
Mm.
So it's for mostly for the chicken, chicken
Mm,
store,
mm, mm.
everything. Yeah, that was one of my. I got involved like luckily before I started my architecture journey straight
Mm.
after SPM. Yeah,
It must be so like a touching moment where you revisit the building like after what 20 years?
yeah,
A
something
good
like that.
20 years, 30 years. Oh,
Mhm.
okay. Wow. I should visit
And
that
then
and then
I
say
I
like,
I I
yeah.
ruined a lot of things in the web market because but during construction they will do a lot of marking for the leveling everything, right? So
Mm.
if you don't have knowledge or anything, you will just ruin everything because I always step on things that I I don't care. I mean, it's not I don't care. It's like I thought
You
it would
don't know,
it
you don't
mean
know that you could care
yeah
about that.
it
Yeah.
mean to be there. I thought it's already cured or something. So I just ruined everything, and then all the labor worker were just staring at me.
And it's interesting because it's not, well, it could be when we study architecture, we tend to go for something very special, like we wanted to do community library or public project. But then when it comes to practice work, there are also projects like shop lots or like row houses. But I think it's quite fortunate because in a way to do a market is quite rare. In a way, within like 20 kilometers, you will have one rather than 20 houses at one time. So
Yes.
public project is quite rare for us to get involved, actually, especially in government projects, even rare. So that must be quite an interesting process for you. So now you mentioned also you have a studio. So what do you mind sharing like what are the projects that you are working on? It's much more like interior design, refurbishment project in a way.
Uh, right now we have a project, also wet market, but it's a
Mm,
kind of small one. So it's interesting because just during COVID, the government come out with a few SOP. So
mm,
all the food staller have to follow that. So they asked us to come up with a design. I mean, to follow this SOP because
mm,
the SOP is mostly about the circulation and the flow in a wet market because
mm,
you only have one entrance and then one exit. So you won't have a cross circulation
mm,
to infect others like because the COVID is quite a serious case back then. And then we design in a new way because never people never seen a supermarket design in a zigzag way because
right.
because usually we want to maximize the efficiency of the
Yeah.
building. Yeah. And then since this thing come back, yeah, it's quite interesting. And then you want to go to a wet market without touching anything. So we try to avoid all these things.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Or by incorporating it with technology, so everything will be mostly automated. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of like considered as public or community project. So what are
Yeah.
the, perhaps there are certain approach is different when you're dealing with private client is different because there's only one or two client, let's say a husband and wife, or maybe a children, but then community, the user scope is way broader. So
Yes.
so in speaking of this, what are the approaches that you actually, you have to take to get involved perhaps with the public, or there will be some public consultation, to ask the public what do they think about this wet market. Is this come to a point where this is the process that you have to take?
Yeah. Actually, the wet market is already exist. So we
Mm,
just doing the refurbishment. And
right.
then the way we how to we tackle this actually we interview all the food staller. So to
Mm,
ask how do you manage, how do you do your business, and then how do you deliver your goods, everything. So we have to get familiar with each of the user because
mm.
we are here dealing with let's say about 10 to 20 of
Stores, is it?
people, yeah, of
Right.
stores.
Right.
So each of them have their own business strategy and also the way that they deliver stuff and then do their business. So we have to gather all this information and then come up with a solution to solve this problem.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, when it comes to, there was an interview that you did with
Mm.
Kanto. I think that was with the William D as well. So bunch of WTA staff as well and their colleagues. So you say that you started your practice with community-based projects. So is that So the community project is the one that you did in Johor, or your self-initiated projects?
Actually, I started community project when I study tailors. So
Okay.
the very first one is for the dog shelter. Actually,
Okay.
yeah, it's not for humans, it's for dog. It's for animals.
Is it the
And then
CSI module? No.
no, it's the pause dog shelter.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, all this we raise our own fund, and then we get fund from the communities, and then we also invite the community to work with us. So
Mm,
we like, because each of us we are not professional builders,
yeah.
so our knowledge about the building construction is really limited.
Yeah.
So we have to share the knowledge with the community, like how do you do this, and then do you want to do you mind to join us to get this project to be done, to be complete. So in that project, actually we learn quite a lot.
Mm,
Yeah, it's quite interesting. And then that's how I started to say, actually a small building, when you finish, it does impact. It's not necessary that a big project
yeah.
give the society an impact. Actually, a small does a big impact as well.
Yeah. Well, I've
Yeah.
been talking about that because you mentioned about small project and big projects, which later on we're going to talk about the COVID quarantine facilities and also the big master plan that you did. Um, if we are going to talk about the word community, it's kind of different because when you cater for, let's say, even a dog shelter or um, small project like wet market compared to super huge master planning of almost a city. So how do you define the word community in a sense where, one is the user are different, and two is the funding are totally different as well. One is we are talking about millions on one side, another one maybe few thousand. So in a way, you see community, this word is a very neutral word, but it's still applicable in those scenarios. So how do you see, this word is community? I think is in architecture school. I'm sure you've been to Crete, and then the students talk about community, and this word is at some point might be misleading in cultural way as well. We thought that, we cater for the youth, then it's fine, that's community, but there are deeper understanding, perhaps from your working experience, you see the word differently.
Actually, the word community is too broad, and then
Yeah.
you have a lot of surface and layering. It's just not about, okay, you do this for the community and then that's it. It's
Yeah.
for community. Actually, back to the root of this word. Actually, it's about balance.
Mm.
Balance will be the keyword for this. I found myself like coming back over and over again to the concept of balance. I mean, the longer I live in this world, the more I realize that the true of art of living is in balance.
Mm.
And then the true of job of an architect is to create balance system.
Mm.
So I mean, just let me share with you about there's a poetry of architecture.
Mm.
Yeah. To me, a work of architecture has to address a few factors. So the first one is function.
Mm.
So every structure, every building needs to have a purpose to work
Mm.
and work well. Otherwise, it's useless. There's no meaning. Okay, it's
Mm.
meaningless. And then the second point is it must meet the criteria.
Mm.
So the criteria can be various. So for example, it can be the governmental building requirements,
Mm.
client cost and budget, and then to be delivered on time, also the quality construction and meet other criteria. Let's say, for example, green design.
Mm.
Okay. The third factor will be it must be beautiful. And then of course this thing is very subjective. And
Yeah.
then that's where this poetry comes in.
So it's a
Yeah.
very Vitruvian
Yes.
philosophy, right?
And then the fourth one is I think is the most important one, is the happiness factor. So the architecture must have make people happy. If, for example, you do a house for a family, you can actually positively transform their life, and then you
Mm.
can make them immensely happy. Similar with the office design, you can make its user incredibly happy working within it. So before we start a design, we always ask ourselves, what can we do to make this user and people happy? What are the things we can put in, and what do they want? Uh, I call it happiness. Some of them is calling it livability.
Mm.
So for me, it's happiness lah. Of course, we want to have all these factors.
Mm.
In the end, it only comes to the committee. So committee is always the top layer.
Mm.
There's a few layers to make this happen. Yeah.
Mm. That's interesting because it come across something very similar like the I learned the bottle on architecture of happiness, but that one is more philosophical in a sense. There's because he's standing from a point of view of like a philosopher perspective. So speaking of function wise, not very much, but there is also another layer where to ensure that people is happy. I think when it comes to community wise, I mean the happiness we tend to this topic is kind of like related to how do we see money as well, because when we talk about big project, money is actually equals to quote unquote happiness in a way. I know it sounds very superficial, but when we do a big project, money is actually one of the key factor. And how the financial sustainability, how the whole thing cycle as well, the business, you make sure that people can actually live happy. You don't want them to stay away from, you don't want people to live in like a poverty is kind of thing. So when you do big project, how do you see happiness in this sense? Like, do you define like workability, access to park, or access to natural landscape and all this? Is it kind of like a happiness in this way, like by strategy wise? So is this kind of like happiness?
I mean, it's two different things.
Yeah.
You can use money to buy happiness, but in architecture, happiness doesn't define in this way. It's like,
Sure.
let's say for someone who doesn't know anything about architecture, once they go into the space, they will feel it. It's about the intangible part of the architecture side.
Yeah.
So if you talk about money, everything, most of it is about tangible. So we are talking the art part of the architecture side, which is about the feeling of it.
Yep.
So even though it's they do not nothing about the architecture, once they go in, they will feel something different. They will feel like it's a good space. That's how you achieve a good building. Even though they know nothing about architecture, you already achieve the intention of this building. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm quite interested in talking about like big project, because when you are doing a big project like master planning, in a general sense, to try to understand or define happiness is what we can do our best, because perhaps we don't live there, or maybe the project is started off somewhere like a reclaimed land, or like totally new canvas in a way. So there's nothing much like a cultural reference in a way, because these are new land. Otherwise, we can just refer to the neighbor or island where there is actually connected, because as I know, the master plan that you did is a reclamation project in a way. So there is actually by talking about cultural reference, we try our best to understand what's the history and then what's the connectivity, and also try to understand, for example, okay, maybe Philippines is more with bicycle, for example, and then you try to understand and what's the strength in that sense to improve that. We can come back to that, but I just thought that when it comes to the time where you were still a student, so what do you think that community, this was still a keen interest for you throughout the whole assignment period? Or do you think that it's been shifting, like you've been looking out into different kind of architects and different kind of works or philosophy or concept?
To be frankly, when I was studying, I got no direction at all. When you talk about community, it's like because the brief say, you need to be a community-based project.
Yeah.
You just have to follow, and then until a certain point, you would think that you would develop your own philosophy in a way that is it the path and the direction you wish to pursue it. And then I mean, all this architecture is a long journey, and then
It is.
you have to keep trying and trying. And then of course, when studying, I mean, there's a whole purpose why do we need to study? Go to the university to study. To develop your thinking, your critical thinking, your creativity. So I think just right after in the middle of when I studying master, I started to get I mean, have a deeper knowledge about what I really want to pursue it, and then what actually the society need, and then try to look at different layer of the problem, and then how to tackle with a different solution. Yeah, because like in the school that teach you that 1 + 1 is 2.
Yeah.
I was always curious myself. Is it 2? Yeah, it's 2. It's correct, but then can it be other way?
Yeah.
So I always question myself. That's why I'm also seeking for the balance, like what I talked before.
Yeah.
So balancing not just about architecture, also in our life, how to you balance your work and life, which I cannot master yet. I always have to work until in the midnight.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I think
it's,
there are certain things that you really couldn't. I mean, there's no such things of perfect project though. I do believe that, because there are different criteria or priority when you work on certain projects. That's why it's so diverse. When you look at student works, it's like 10 students have different priority or ways of looking at things. What was the memorable project assignment that you did though? I mean, I'm quite curious in particular in Taylor's one, because I've been through that, and then perhaps it's maybe the same environment in a way.
I think the most interesting one is we have to build a visitor center for the Orang Asli. It's a Mat Mary in Pulau Keri. I think this one is pretty interesting because we actually have to live there with them to understand their culture, everything, their lifestyle. So
yeah,
when you think yourself as the user of the project, actually you can design the building better. Because you would imagine yourself using, let's say, go to kitchen. I'm using this kitchen.
yeah.
What would be the best place to put your stove, to clean your stuff? So you would think it different way.
Yeah.
I think that there's a quite interesting project because we actually stayed there for 3 days and then staying with them. Yeah.
I've been there because my hometown is at Kelanang, very near to Jugra, then Pulau Keri. I've been to this visitor center, but that one is kind of, quite typical visitor center. And then there's another new building, if not mistaken, where you can watch the films. There's some documentation of, like presentation board-ish. And then I can remember the most is actually like a field where you can try shoot with the bamboo.
Yes.
So I'm not sure, is it the one that so when you were doing that, so that's the building has been existing there, I assume.
Yes.
Then after that, that's where it becomes like a site for the students.
Yes, we have to repropose it.
Right. So what happened afterward? Is there any way to to get in
actually,
there to present to the council or something?
We presented to the owner, I mean to the council as well. And then in the end, they have to choose a one they like, and then to start to build it. Yeah. And then in the end, fortunately, they chose mine. So mine was selected. Whoa. Yeah, mine was selected. But then because when back then I didn't know anything about building construction, so I think the building cannot be complete or something.
Oh.
It's not physically
feasible.
Yeah.
But the current, so I assume the new building, which is a new extension, is actually part of your project in a way.
I don't know. I haven't gone back to pay a visit.
It's never too late to go back and send them an invoice or something.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. How about like in Bauhaus, like in Dessau? Is it Dessau? Yeah, in Germany, Dessau.
Yeah, Dessau. In Dessau. In Dessau, the project actually, okay, the Bauhaus system is kind of different from Taylor's. So they are actually really free. They just let you to experience what you want. And then actually there's one project is in Gothenburg, which I have to build which I have to preserve an old building. And then we give them a new program and then make it alive again.
Right.
So also giving this project is called Community Library and Market. So it's a hybrid for the market and for the library.
Right.
So actually you become a community hub for the residents surrounding it. And then the challenges actually is how do we preserve the building, and then by keeping its heritage and its story before before we inject a new program into it. Yeah. So before that is a warehouse.
Right.
So we kind of doing the style like we try to preserve there's a portion of it, and then we inject a new portion to make it like a zigzag form. I mean, it's not a zigzag form, it's more like a casket. Yeah, to give a new identity to the building.
I mean, yeah, speaking of that, right, I think there's another interesting side where I usually would ask my friend, because I think, you know, doing architecture, we refer to precedent study a lot. I mean, perhaps usually we would just refer to a certain names, like, you know, like a lot of young students nowadays, they love Bell Girls, for example. But I'm quite curious, like, you know, throughout your undergraduate time and then until postgraduate, who do you look up to, and, you know, sort of can know what's your interest as well. Like, you know, some like Zaha Hadid, then we know that it's gonna be a curved building. Some love like Norman Foster, then you'll be quite glass and alignment and all this. How about you? And then do you think that along the way you refer to, there's a certain, I don't like the word style, but rather is the approach is quite different. Yeah. What do you think? Like, who do you have in mind, or who did you have in mind before that?
Actually, for me, I don't have any preference.
Yeah.
So because each project is unique and then it's different, I would just study how do they started at the early stage. How would they do their space planning, and then to study the reason behind it. And then I believe that the facade is not intentionally there. It should be once you do your space, and then by considering a lot of different things like the site, the climate, everything, and then it will naturally form. That's how you make the building interesting, and then have their own identity. So it's not just that you look at this design, you think it's nice, it's beautiful. I want to have this in my building.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's more to studying how do they start this. I mean, the connection between the user and the building, and then also have to keep asking ask yourself about the program. What program actually you want to put in there, and then can it be mixed? Because we always have the stereotype, and like what I say, like one plus one is two.
I'm quite interested to know what people read during their time, or is there any particular book that you look up and always, you know, find it like a quote unquote of your Bible in architecture?
Not really. I don't really like to study books. That's there's a bad part of me. I only study when it's needed. Yeah, I think I don't have the habit to read books, and I wish I could have that. Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to stare at a book. Instead, I like to travel. I like to travel and then see the thing physically instead of reading it in a book in a words. So I do travel a lot. Yeah. So when I travel, I would really when I travel, I don't really like to take any public transport. So basically, I like to walk. I mean, when I travel to UK or Spain, I just walk, and then I will just stay at the building, in front of the building, and think, and then started to think, look at the details, everything. Why would they do so? You know?
There's another side where non-architects don't understand. They will just be like, why these people so weird, just looking at buildings for hours?
Yeah, and then I start touching things. You know? So like.
But would that be part of the reason why you actually work in Philippines, though? I mean, you could be in any other country, right? Like Japan or Taiwan or anywhere, though. Or you could have stayed in Germany to work. So yeah, quite interested. What inspired you to work in Philippines, or, you know, WTA in specific?
Actually, I didn't plan for that. It's like for my architecture journey, I never planned for that. It's like it just happened. It's I've been thinking like I stay in Europe for two years already, and then is there any other place which I would like to experience and then to learn more about it? And now I was thinking I never been to Philippines, and then Philippines is a good place, and then it's a developing country. You have more opportunity there, and then you don't even know their language, everything. I like the feeling of like reborn. So no friends, no one, nothing, all by yourself.
Yeah.
And
So
then
you
it started.
found the place, then only you found the company that you want to work with.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
So basically, it's if you don't have any friends of anything that makes you comfortable, you were
Yeah.
starting to blend in with the society.
Right.
You are starting to blend with the community and then live like them, and then just like a Filipino. I'm just like a Filipino in Philippines. I
Uh,
started to learn how to speak Tagalog, everything.
they call it the Philippine people. Is it called Pinoy? Is it
Pinoy.
Pinoy?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So
That's
how?
why
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's why I call myself a cockroach because I can live anyway. I mean, just
You just won't die. You just stay so
I just
tough.
won't die. Yes, yes. I just won't die. I just like to.
So now you're working in Malaysia. So how do you find the relation? It's not just about talking to contractor, perhaps in Philippines, and also how they work. So do you think is it okay? I mean, perhaps in the Western country, you will find it much more obvious. For example, in Malaysia, you work quite hard. It's like OT a lot and things. But how does that work in Philippines? Would it be the same, or do you find there's not much difference between working in Philippines and Malaysia? I mean, climate wise is quite similar, I assume.
Mhm. This is our culture already. I mean, it's in our blood. I mean, for Asia, at least for Asia. I mean, in Asia, you can't really find an architect that doesn't do OT that much.
Mm,
I
mm,
mean,
mm, mm.
it's part of the culture. So yeah, I mean, it's quite similar. But then, in the layer of culture, you'll be a totally different as already. So it's a two different thing. Like I mean, the architecture is more to American style, and then their standards also
Mm,
American. So which
mm.
make when you start to design, it's totally different. You cannot use the same way to think of
So
it.
there's no imperial system. It's all inches and feet. Huh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, right.
I have a cultural shock when I got there. It's like people are too friendly, and then I was like, wow. And then the working environment is also quite nice.
Mm. And then
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and and earlier before we start this conversation, you also talk about how well it's a big firm, but you don't feel corporate.
Yeah, I don't feel corporate. And then the thing I like in their company is there's no political issue.
Mm,
So I think there's what environment for the employee
mm.
need to have. Yeah.
Right, right. And that sort of inspired to be a better boss in Malaysia as well.
Yeah, yeah. And then we are free to do anything. You can play games, anything. Just make sure that you did your job. That's it.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's pretty much that's the
Mhm.
priority in a way. Okay. So um well, apart from a community, that's a big word as well. I think another big word that I would like to ask is about sustainability, and also because you mentioned about these kind of Vitruvian principles, talks about function, talks about longevity, talks about I think longevity also kind of similar to sustainability in a way. It's about a smart resources management as well. It's you don't want the building that to demolish after 3 months, you know. So um happiness is definitely one thing. In a way, how do you make sure that the people is always happy about things? And there are things that, of course, you know, after 20 or 30 years you wanted to renew or refurbish to keep up with time. So when let's talk about the word sustainability, how do you see that in, you know, perhaps you work in different firms or you studied in different environment as well. So how would you define sustainability in a way, perhaps in emotional wise or in financial wise, in social wise? I know it's a big question, but I'm quite curious. How do you think? What do you think about that?
Mm, First of all, sustainable architecture is not emerging as a trend. Actually, it's more like a lifestyle.
Mm,
So it's not a sustainable trend we are right now going for. Actually, it's part of it already. It's part of our lifestyle already.
mm.
So actually, we are thinking and looking how can we actually make green spaces that integrate into buildings
Mm,
themselves and become a really vital part of the design project.
mm,
So it's also become a more holistic practice when we can make it better than when with everyone involved, because sustainable is just not about there's a lot of things. It's like a triangle.
Mm.
So there will be environmental, economic, and then some of it will be
Like
the how.
social or cultural
Yes,
side.
social in yes, cultural side. So yeah, I mean sustainable this way is I think we need another chapter
Oh,
chapter
sure,
for this.
sure, sure.
It's too broad, and then yeah.
But I think that there's another question where, because I mean throughout how we study architecture and practice in architecture, we often do the things before the user. So of course there is actually a post occupancy, like a survey or evaluation. But well, I mean most of the time architects will not be able to do that, because unless you are the owner or client, then you run the practice or you run the building. So how would you see, like, to keep the balance where we architects is not just about designing the building before someone move in, but also ensure that people are happy to live, like let's say after 5 years, to do like a check in a way to to make sure it's sustained, in a way it's sustained in a certain ideal that we define, or perhaps we might not define, like things that you design a house, you might not expect that the owner might add a car porch, some roof and all this. So sustainable, in a sense, in a way, we tend to put it as the plan, but we don't see it afterward. So what I mean, how do you see, and do you think that is there any way that architects can be more involved into much more longer time frame? But I know that there is too much work, right? Because we have to take care of everyone's feeling afterward. So I think, do you think it is kind of like a flaw in a way where the profession couldn't really satisfy everyone?
Of course we couldn't satisfy everyone. And then for example, the master plan project I did in Manila, Philippines, how do we make sure that it happens? At least, okay, when we build a city, we cannot make sure everyone follows what we want. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So at least we want them to follow what we expected, at least 60 to 70%.
Yeah.
So that's why we come up with a guideline. So the guideline is the thing to protect this concept and then to make this happen. For example, let's say the owner wanted to buy a land to design a building, a high-rise building.
Yeah.
They must be following our guideline.
Like building height and all this, is it?
Yes,
Right.
yes, everything. So for example, in the guideline, for the Horizon Manila, at the ground floor, we want them to have a 5-foot walkway, which I introduced our Malaysia culture, architecture style into that. And then also we wanted to make sure then that to have a green plot ratio of 1:1. So meaning that, let's say you have a 2 acre of land, you need to provide not less than 2 acres of green area. So there's the criteria you need to fulfill in order for you to construct this building.
So I mean, right. So in a way, it's like well, now I find well, I think it happens in the practice. I mean, that's, you can't really change in a way. When you design a building, you have like, okay, this is the wall, this is the living room, and this is the bathroom and things. You can't really change around because we already constructed it. But at the same time, what I think you mentioned about the program, the use of space, is kind of like a policy in a way. When we talk about like small space, like a house, you have like, okay, this is, bathroom, because the piping, everything, plumbing will be there. So you can't really, change it into people who don't, wanted to live in the bathroom. That's not right. And then the ventilation and all this is kind of set. So do you think like architects is kind of like a setting a brief to change people's lifestyle as well, or to accommodate someone's lifestyle as well?
Yes,
It's like
I
a grid
agree.
line. It's like a
Yes.
guideline to live.
It's a guideline for you to follow, or maybe you can follow. You can just challenge the guideline.
Right.
So it's the thing that okay, we do this, and then there's a reason behind it. Why would we want to do this? And then by doing it, actually there's a reason behind, because the world won't work without some guidelines.
Yeah.
That's why we have laws and all these things.
Right.
But every laws and everything, there's a reason behind it. Okay, so you have to make this ecosystem work. You need to have all these guidelines to make it sustain.
Right.
Otherwise, if you don't have don't have a guide, everyone's just going and then it's just beyond our control.
That's interesting because I was having a conversation with my Indonesian friend where he think that in Indonesia there is not, there are definitely some guidelines or like SOP, there will be some rules and regulation, but it's not stricter than we thought. That's where a lot of time, perhaps in Philippines or in Malaysia, there allows contingency to happen. For example, you can, quote unquote, chin-chai things to happen, So how do you see like the flexibility at the same time, yet you wanted to keep an order? That's the, like perhaps when it comes to the balance, is quite hard to strive for.
That's why I say just now, you just have to assume 60 to 70% of people will follow that thing. And then the other 30% might not be bad. You might produce some interesting project.
Yeah.
So they challenge the brief and then you will see that, oh yeah, it's nice, it's acceptable, that it's beyond our control. Of course, we cannot control everything.
Sure.
So this is the least we want to do to make sure it's tied back to our concept. And then that's our intention at the first.
So while you are designing the buildings, talks about form, building heights, the ceiling height, the construction materials and all this, you also do involve in the policy making part as well, which is the guidelines in a way.
Yeah, a little bit. But we won't control them. We won't control them this much. It's like, the basic, back to the basic. The basic criteria we want to achieve. There's a minimum. We won't control like you cannot go beyond this form or how is it.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's still
as an overall master plan.
So it's sort of like like a brief for the students to develop, but yet doesn't mean that you can't do something crazy or creative about it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. So we actually talk about Horizon Manila, and the second one is actually emergency quarantine. So do you mind to briefly tell us about these two projects, the background in a way? What's your involvement like in both projects? Are you the principal designer for both projects as well?
For the Horizon Manila, me and William Teo, my principal architect from WTA, we were the leader for this project. So we started this project I think right after we finished our EQF in Philippines. The project is a reclamation project, as what you mentioned before. It's a 419 hectares reclamation, and then it got divided. It's a three different islands,
right?
And then we connect it with an urban park and also a urban canal. So you've been thinking that everyone like to live beside the water. Why not? And then actually you come back to the history and the culture of Philippines or the Filipino. Even Malaysia, we started our settlement along the river. Yeah. So that's how we think. I think it's a good way to do so because people love water. And then the strategy is we wanted to create a hyperloop community,
right,
which is barrier free for everyone to engage. So in this overall master plan, we have about 28 different communities, each of them with their own identity, and then which they can mingle, and then it's totally barrier free. In Philippines, we call the each community we call it barangay.
Okay.
Whereas in English means community,
Okay.
So each of the barangay, they have their own identity. Let's say when we specify it, there would be like a art district, and then a district for tourism, a district for art, for the sport, and then for the courtyard district, transportation hub. So there would be a different kind of communities to mix the entire master plan work. So you just not cater for the old people. You also have to cater for the youngster, for the tourists, even for the foreigner. So it caters for everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
But I somehow, put it in a very simple term, it might sound wrong, but I'm just gonna ask in a way, do you find designing urban planning or doing like a city, new city planning. It feels like a stimulation in a way. Almost like a game in a way. I mean, I can't say that, you know, the architects are playing someone's life in a way, but there is this playful ideas where to include so many diversity of project in a way, but it's spark out with this kind of playful idea. So perhaps it's like almost like a Lego piece where, you know, this is the, you know, red one is a tower, and then there's a transport hub, there's a spot and things. But how I'm quite curious, like the process of designing a city planning, like how do you I mean, perhaps both you and William had gone through this phase where how do you actually design a city? Like how do you define, like, is it by climate as the main criteria, like a view or the sun, you know, and the temperature and all this, or is it driven by other factor? For example, maybe there are some political influence, but not the key thing at this point. But what were the process when doing such a big project?
For this kind of skill of master planning, the most important one, the first thing we tackle actually is the circulation. So in this, 419 hectares. So the first thing we need to do is to provide a loop to connect these three islands together. So if you have a chance to look at my master plan, there will be a loop, a full loop to connect three of the island together, and then each of the island they will have their own loop.
Right.
So that's how we started, and then we wanted to make sure that it's a walkable city. So basically, in the city, you won't walk more than 5 minutes to a public transit. So basically, just about 400 meters in distance.
Right.
So within the 5 minutes, you can just reach a public transport stop, and then you can take the transport to anywhere in the island. So that's how we try to minimize the usage, the reliance of on mobility and also the private transport. And then by making more friendly and more walkable to the people. So that's the first thing we need to tackle in this master planning.
I do have this question might sound quite off way, because I saw the presentation video, and you know the presentation, and there's a loop, there's a model, there's a physical model as well. How helpful is the presentation video and also the narrative that, you know, when it's presented to the general public? Like I'm sure it's actually quite simple to understand. It's quite straightforward. It's, you know, telling them this is actually the loop, and then from here to here, this is the transport and things. So did you actually involve in the presentation part as well? And what were the response from the general public? And also, what about the client? In this sense, is the government, which is the Manila mayor?
Yes. Yes, I got involved in the presentation, and actually the first intention why we want to do this documentation actually is to present to the public. But since this project is for the public, it's not a private project or any so. So you need to convey the idea, the concept of this concept to the people, and then you need to get feedback from them. So that did a part is quite a big important role for this project. We get to know what actually people thinking in their mind. Do they like this master planning? What do they think about this new city born in Manila? So you will get a lot of feedback, and then you will inject an image into their mind. So there will be a new reclamation project upcoming, and then this will be like a full green sustainable city. So they will have they won't be surprised when this thing started.
Or too alienated for them.
Yes, it's already in their heart. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's a main intention we do that. And of course, we have to juggle between the politic parts and also the private sector. Yeah, which we managed to do so. And then we presented to the Manila mayor of Manila. And then yeah, we are quite agree. I mean, first have the same vision right now to make this to happen for the better life of for the Manila new.
Right. I mean, when you talk about like people who actually live in Manila, this is Manila project, isn't it? So when comes to that, the reference wise, there must be so many different kind of ideas that put it into together. Perhaps might be influenced by Thailand. There's a river market kind of idea into it, or maybe there's a Venice a little bit because it's a river town. Perhaps there is a certain alleyways in Japan that you like to integrate. I mean, in this case, it will be quite Philippine project, but yet there are different kind of references to different kind of places as well, which I quite curious. Like, is there any other reference where you wanted to perhaps like 5 foot way idea is actually like Malaysia, maybe Philippines there is actually a 5 foot way project. So I'm quite curious, is there other external references that actually incorporated in this sense? Because I found another things that something quite odd when it comes to Malaysia, especially there are certain urban planning or public realm strategies are too Western. For example, we tend to refer to Jan Gauss, for example. I'm not saying that he's wrong, but it just sometimes it doesn't really work because how we use a public space is just not working well because we perhaps prefer a padang than a river, for example. Or maybe your strategy like Jan Gauss perhaps works in Singapore better or things like this. So how do you see, like, in reference wise, we wanted to make sure it's smart and it's very appropriate to a certain community or a place as well?
Actually, yeah, of course, before we start this project, we did a lot of study and precedents. We study the Amsterdam, Venice, Hudson Yard, all this big city, and then we try to get actually what is the catalyst for the city, and then how do they started to design, and then what's the story behind it. And then for this Manila, the Manila Horizon Manila project, the thing we wanted to actually is starting from, if you know the Tondo in Manila, actually
Right.
that's how the people, how the majority live actually. They have keys playing along the street. Everything is, it's totally barrier free.
Yeah.
So everyone knows everyone. So that's how we want to bring back this kind of culture and feeling back to this master plan. Because we are not trying to build like a really top class kind of city, whereas we try to bring back the community, the sense of community and sense of place for the people who staying in Manila currently. Yeah.
Well,
I mean that's
yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, do you find there's a contrast? I mean, of course, it's a different ball game where when you're dealing with, let's say, Mount Mary Village, that's much more ground level kind of engagement where you talk about like financial one. The community is different. So how do you bring the gap? Do you think is there any way to close the gap between there's no such thing as a hierarchy where whether you are poor or rich, black or white, or any other gender, any other cultural background, you can actually use a space. There is actually, do you think there's a way to do this in the architectural term wise? Strategies wise, I mean, it sounds quite impossible. Of course, it's very tough, it's very complicated network, but yeah, I mean, what's your opinion in this way of yeah.
In terms of the gap between the high income and the lower income group, there's a lot of things, not just architecture can tackle it.
Sure,
What we
sure.
can do in architecture is we need to let unfortunate one or the more vulnerable communities to get better access to all the public facility. I mean, public facility is not something fancy for the people who are richer to enjoy. Actually, it's meant for everyone. So I mean, this is the thing in terms of architecture, this is the thing we can do to minimize the gap between the rich people and the poor. So it got reflected in the plan because we try to inject a lot of different public facility. Each of the public facility have their own identity. So let's say if you're staying in the extreme park or more youngster space, we are providing a public space which is like a skate park. So it's more adventurous. And then whereas in the tourism part, we are proposing a public facility of introducing a vertical zoo. So all this is free for the public to use. It's not just a rich enjoyment for the rich people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's That's the thing we can do in terms of architecture.
Yeah, because I got that from your sharing session in Taylor's as well. You mentioned about the unfortunate or underprivileged community or the vulnerable community to be part of the project as well. I think when it comes to COVID quarantine facilities, is much more different because no matter who you are, as long as you need help, that's where you need to go. So that's kind of different. We are not talking about income group. We are talking about healthcare. So that's interesting, and also because we never experienced COVID before. I mean, before that, perhaps we experienced something like contagious, like SARS or something, but there is no precedent in this sense. Like talking about, I think at the point of time there are so many things we don't. I think at the point of time the design team don't see Omicron coming as well. Omicron is kind of developed later on, so I have a question in one, how do you design something that there's no precedent before, and the medical study wise about the virus is not so concrete because it has been variant in different ways as well. And the second thing is, what about the building when it's, now it's kind of tamed down, and how do you see the development and the users of the building later on, the afterlife? So I'm quite curious about the before life and afterlife of this project. Like, how do you see this?
Yeah. Um, we architect, we cannot tell the
We are
future.
not
We
the
don't know
fortune
what,
teller.
we are not a fortune teller, and then we don't know what's going to happen. But for sure, this virus thing will be there for a few years, and then it will also get mutated and develop into a different kind of virus.
Sure.
So actually, the architects, I mean, in Singapore or whatever, they have a study like since after SARS, they already start to implement more technology into the buildings. For example, there will be like a sensor tab, sensor soap dispenser. You go into a toilet without touching any door. So actually, there's a part of process how architecture shifted. So yeah, and in terms of space planning, of course, right now we are allocating some, like let's say for housing, we're allocating a space for flexible office. It can easily convert into something else. But then you wouldn't really make a much like a big impact to the architecture. I mean, at least at this time. Yeah, I mean for the future, we just can like what we say, we implement more sustainable thing. I think this one will actually speed up the adoption of sustainable lifestyle. So yeah, to make the world more greener, and then the planet more to minimize, basically to minimize the damage to the planet.
Sure.
Because right now we're starting to get the awareness of we've done all this damage to the planet, and then it's time for us to try to slow down a little bit, and then yeah.
Right. I mean, what? Okay, then in that case, there are two views on so-called low-tech and high-tech sustainability. There are actually people who actually use indigenous technology, for example, like mud, bamboo, timber, and all this. While another side so recently I came across this new design by Foster and Partner in New York, and then they were saying, oh, it's zero carbon footprint. They're going to recycle the materials, where there is also always a flexibility for you to look at low tech and high tech in a way. Perhaps I hope I categorize it right. So both of them are actually heading to one same agenda, but it's just a different approach. So do you actually? I'm sure while you are doing the master plan and also the emergency shelter, where emergency shelter is much more reusing the recyclable materials as well, and then also about the prop, where it's fast building. While another side is talking about glass building, and also they are much more high tech, much more I can't say in more intellectual strategies, but much more technological side, modern technology side. So what's your thought in this? Like, what's your reflection after you have done the two projects?
First of all, these two projects actually is quite different. One is the EQF. You can see the impact straight away. The other one is the master plan. It takes about a few decades for it to happen.
Right.
So the process is way longer. And then whereas the other one is, we're talking about speed, because we try to flatten the curve. We try to stop the spread. That's why we use recycled material, and then easy source. Also the labor work. So it's easier. It's really easy for everyone to work together and then to get this done. Whereas for the others one is more about, we're talking about 10 to 20 years time. Of course,
Even
they will be
50 or things. Yeah.
yeah. Of course, they will we will combine. We'll have some new technology coming in. So we have to keep updating our building construction method to cater that. So it's two different approach. Like,
Yeah.
let's say for the material that you mentioned, just like a bamboo or zero carbon footprint, it can be done. But the thing is it cost efficient in a way? I mean, okay, let's say for example, if China right now, China is the biggest producer or manufacturer in the world.
Yeah.
If China can find a way to make all this sustainable material can be mass produced, it could be the way. Yeah, it could be the way, because everything, if it's not cost efficient, there's no point doing it, and then there will be no one doing it. So it's always about the balancing, and then also the key element of
Right.
in sustainable.
I mean, do you see your inclination into which one? Because I mean, of course, there are time where you actually prefer like in the middle, where you can actually both on both sides. But perhaps working in Philippines and then now in Malaysia, do you think there is also, because in Malaysian architecture industry, I see more on the low tech side, where we are talking about bare finish, brick wall, and perhaps some bamboo, like Elena Jamil did, and then there are architects who use timber, which is quite. I find it funny because Malaysia is actually very blessed with abundance of natural resources, but yet we actually depend on concrete a lot. So what's your point of view in this as you are running a practice as well? So when it comes to like talking to the client, perhaps you wanted to try something new as well. For example, why don't we try timber? Why don't we try passive, like ventilation as well and all this, rather than go to much more high tech ish? But of course, that's the preference of the client as well. So, but when it comes to your practice now, do you see there's an inclination more to high tech or low tech?
In Malaysia, we cannot deny that we are labor intensive country. So labor intensive meaning that it's way cheaper to use concrete compared to steel or even timber.
Right.
Yeah, that's how in different country they have their own architecture style. It's because of the surrounding, the context, the people, the craft people, even the climate will affect how would you choose a material for your building.
Yeah.
For example, like in Australia, the cost for the labor is so intense.
Right.
That's why they prefer to use prefab
or stud wall or things.
Yes, like start like drywall, everything prefab.
Right.
So you have to, based on the context, to see what's happening here. In Malaysia, I don't see that we still can get out of this box of labor intensive culture. So yeah.
So if we're talking about like technology or assembly or construction sector, where they are actually, it's like a two cycle, where do you think the technology or the construction material or the way to assemble influence architecture, or architecture will influence another way? So in a way, if every architects also tend to go with high tech, and then the high technology will somehow bloom up because there's a demand. It's a supply, it's a demand and supply kind of chain. But do you think if there's a way to change that, would you change high tech, or would you change the technology first, or would you change the architecture first? Do you think from your opinion, do you think which one is much more easier to do that first?
Easier to do. Easier part, of course, is the second one.
So start from the architects, then change the technology.
Yeah, I think start from the architecture. You have to, the first thing you have to convince the client first. So they will spend that money for you to experiment this thing. So since you have, once you have this president is out or the building is complete, people will start to notice that. So it's something feasible. It's not like just intangible.
Right.
Yeah. So
do
you
you,
need to have an impact to make this happen. But of course, it takes a lot of time.
yeah, because it's
Yeah.
almost like changing the consumerism and mindset as well.
Yes, yes.
Do you,
Because
yeah.
we've been, I mean, Malaysia have been using concrete, like all this labor intensive culture for at least easily 30 to 40 years. And then
Yeah.
it's already deep into our root. So
It's a bit hard to
yeah.
change, yeah. Well,
Yes.
I spoke to my friend as well, and then he was talking about this kind of prefab technology is not really something quite a thing here, quite a thing in Malaysia. So okay, perhaps, but there's also another question where, because I was before that I was thinking, oh okay, Malaysia has a lot of potential that we can try, like experimenting as well. So is there anything that we can look forward from your side to experiment something, like perhaps using concrete to be, or maybe concrete, or maybe some clay or my brick wall into something experimental-ish? Do you think you working on something interesting in this sense?
Yes, the concrete one. But actually we did a lot of study, like what you say, the prefab just now. Actually we did some comparison and then the study about why Malaysia is still not using prefab, for example.
Mm.
The first thing is because Malaysia we don't have, the first thing, we don't have enough population. That's why we don't have big demand of building, I mean, at least medium rise building. Whereas in Singapore, they use a lot of prefab because they have a lot of HDB. And then all of them is kind of typical. Yeah. In Malaysia, and our government doesn't enforce that to do so. That's why there's still a lot of choices for people to, why not we just use conventional concrete, other just why prefab? Yeah. So it also come to a point that politics hold an important role in this. So yeah, it's
But when it comes to like prefab, I'm sure Malaysia do have, but it's just that it's not well populated or or facilitated in a way. I'm not sure. Is it from your study? Perhaps you think that is it because much more expensive to use prefab rather than the bricklayers to lay the brick one by one? Is it by the cost?
In Malaysia, most of them use prefab for the low cost housing, like for example for the flat, and then yeah, I mean it's always more expensive if it's not mass production, because you need to make the mold. The mold costs a lot, and then it also reduce the flexibility for the user, because you can't really demolish it, and then you cannot do renovation of it. So there's a lot of limitation, and then we have so many houses in Malaysia for them to choose. They would not choose something that is so limited. I mean like it's not that flexible. Yeah.
Right. And then because lots of prefab things are already standardized.
Yes, and then it got reflected in the market. So there's all the feedback coming back, and then yeah. So there will be no developer doing so unless the government force.
Or the market will decide the price as well.
Yes.
So do you think there's a chance to work on this housing project as well, to try something new? Or I mean, even though in small projects there are certain things to try out as well. For example, like how we lay the brick, perhaps it will come out with like a van brick or things like this. Would that be your interest to?
Yeah, of course. I mean, small project will be easier for us to implement this. Yeah, because small project you just have to deal with one or two owner maximum. So you have a lot of freedom to play what you want. Not what you want, what the client want, and then you try to convince them.
Sure. Okay. So apart from the wet market, there are actually some private residential project you are working on?
Yeah. There's one project near the coastal in Pontian. It's a bungalow project. So we are doing it with actually we're trying prefab or drywall system. Yeah, material for the project, for the particular project.
Interesting. That's something quite looking for. I mean, because now I'm into the practice as well. I start to understand it's not just about the logistic as well. There's another side like thermal performance, like insulation and all this. So there are so many so many criteria to think about. Right. I think that pretty much. I mean, you share a lot of things about the EQF in in the tailor selling session, and also about the master planning. I think it's almost comes to an end. But there's one big question that I always quite keen to talk about, because there was an interview and the script was talking about future architects. And I think for the next generation architects, or at least our current generation, where we are more environmental aware, we are more socially aware, rather than before that we were talking about like postmodernism talks about style, or talks about, or post-war they have different kind of agenda. So how do you see like future generation of architects would think, or even within your circle of friends or colleagues, what do they think about, the agenda or the direction that the architects would go? And it is quite controversial, quote unquote, in a way, because architecture has been so political. It has been so influenced by so many things. For example, just simple example like Russian and Ukraine war, we sort of define how do we see cost, for example, especially like, the supply is different, the political is different, economic wise is different, how we use space, for example, work from home is now a thing. Yeah, so how do you, what's your thought in like future generations of architects will be, like what do they think about like environment? Will they be more different? It's not just about design, but there's also like when we buy a certain things, we tend to go for, oh, is it a recycled materials perhaps? Or when we drink a coffee, the coffee cup might be different and things. And yeah,
It's like a Miss Universe question.
yeah, I think it's almost like a moral question. But I just think that it's almost, and also we are, when we talk about practice also, we see there's a very interesting agenda or spectrum where a lot of young practitioners, they don't just do one thing. They tend to go for furniture design as well. They tend to go for even podcasts or marketing or digital content as well. You see TikTok, there are architects doing content there as well. I mean, perhaps we narrow down to practice. How do you see the future, or what you are doing now is quite multidisciplinary as well.
Isn't it like the theory of Bauhaus? You not just design for the building, you also design the lifestyle of the
Exactly.
people.
Yeah.
Bauhaus also design for the clothes, the way you live, even the coffee cup, how it looks like. So yeah, I mean, when you talk about the future generation of architect, basically it's us, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a really tough question. And then
Sure.
and I mean, what can we ask ourselves, what are we trying to do in this generation and in this era? Actually, I think we need to learn the good and the bad thing from the past architect, and then for example, the thing that they fail to do, and then try to question everything, even the standard they set.
Yeah.
Always ask, is there a better way we can do things? I mean, that's quite important, because we don't just go blindly, just following okay, there's some famous architect say a certain quote, and then you will just blindly follow and then think it's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, how do you find, like, I mean, this question might sound a little bit political, but I just thought that how do you find as a young architect engage with the, I would say, okay, senior architects, okay?
Yeah.
How do you find the engagement with them? Like it's quite strange, because we just, within the young architects, which I see, well, in my mind, there are a few generations, which I'm not going to talk about in details, but then how do you find the engagement? Like, you can actually talk to someone who actually been in the practice for 30 or 50 years above. Do you think that you actually got to talk to them? Or, I mean, for young architects, it's quite tough, unless you need to mingle your way, network around, be a little bit political, mix with certain institute or university, then only you can manage to talk to these people. But of course, not all of them, but they are actually some quite helpful ones. Yeah. So apart from, how do we actually know the veteran the veteran or the experienced architects is through university, perhaps like from our lecturer, from our professor or things like this. Yeah, but in practice wise, how collaborative are we?
First, okay. If let's say like what you say, if they have been practicing in this architecture field for 30 to 40 years, there must be a reason already they can stay until this long. There must be a way for them to survive or find a way to do architecture. So I mean, there will be some, of course, there will be some benefit when you talk to them. They will teach you, but you will need to digest and think through it. Is it the way that still applicable in this generation? Yeah, so you have to question back. Maybe the time when they do this is the right way to do.
Yeah,
It's a right. Yeah, but right now, by incorporating with all this new technology and all the stuff, is this still the same?
yeah.
When is it? Can it be better? So it's just that it just also depends on the older generation. Are they open-minded to accept our ideas? Yeah, but of course they are more experiment, and then yeah, we can learn a lot from them. But then if you have your own philosophy, you just have to prove them wrong if you think you are right.
Sure.
Yeah.
And also because this is something related to our generation and the previous generation. And also, how about do you actually see yourself teaching and also engage with the future generation, where the younger side? So do you think that there's a chance that you might teach, or you are quite actively engaged with the universities events and activities?
If there's a chance, of course, I would love to teach. Because I mean architecture is not, you can do it by your own. It's a if you want to make change, you have to do something, and then yeah, you cannot just because of you are a good architect and then you will change the city.
Sure.
It doesn't happen that way. So it's always good to do some sharing with at least, I mean, I'm not really good in architecture or something. At least I got some things to share, so they can maybe get benefit from it. Yeah. How about you? Are you
Well,
going into
I'm always interested in teaching. I think whatever I'm doing now in podcast, I think is quite fun as well. I mean, it's always very stimulating to interview with different people like you. I think I see it as a form of teaching in a way, because when people listening
in a new way,
in a very informal way. I hope. Of course, there's always no right thing to say. You even though it could be the most right thing to say, but people will digest and think about it. Oh, it's not really right. But I like the way that if you question it, come and tell me, come and tell me that I'm wrong, and then we can talk about it. That's not interesting. Okay, maybe the last one, it would be, what's your plan like next? Like, is there any exciting projects that you are coming up with, or anything that we can look forward to? So the wet market is one.
Yeah, right now I'm working on another market, but it's a community mall. So this community mall is located in Johor Bahru, in Nusa Jaya, Johor Bahru. The site is a bit interesting because it has an irregular shape and it's a hilly terrain,
right,
which slope up to the hill adjacent to the fairway of the golf course. So the level difference is about 12 meters, which is kind of high. Yeah.
So like 4 stories kind of slope.
Yes, a slope, sloping down. And then the frontage of the mall is pretty long. It's about more than 300 meters long frontage.
Wow.
Yeah, and then in front there will be a shop lot. Yeah. So the concept of this mall is to be biophilic. And then where the building embraces and integrate itself into a natural vegetation and ecosystem of the surrounding because we got surrounded by the golf course.
Right.
It also designed to be like energy efficient, and we are trying to achieve at least a gold rating in green building index.
Yeah.
So while functioning as a retail and commercial center in the suburban of Nusa Jaya, Johor, the mall has an intentional placemaking objective to position itself as a landmark community hub in its vicinity. So just to let you, Nusa Jaya actually is a really low density suburban.
It's a
So
new
we are,
town in a way, new city, isn't it?
yeah, it's a new city near, if you know Legoland, it's
Yeah.
somewhere near that side. Yeah. So we incorporating this new shopping mall concept, which is fully naturally ventilated.
Yep.
And then we try to, like for the mechanical side, we try to maximize its stack ventilation.
Yep.
And then by using the ventilation turbine, which we design it into incorporating into a pyramid glass box.
Right.
So when the air heats up, you will promote the stack effect more efficiently.
So it
Yeah,
will
there's
suck up
some
the heated air in a way.
yeah. So
Interesting.
and also this mall is really green and biophilic. And then in the middle of the mall actually is the prominent grand step which lead up to the first and second floor. So actually you can go up and then you can literally see the landscape at the hilly side.
It's a very ambitious project.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
is it like in the design stage now or?
Yeah, it's a design stage under design development now. Hopefully it will be completed at 2024. Yeah, that's our target.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, it's an interesting project. I think I can imagine it's gonna be quite a new kind of well, I wouldn't say award winning, but it might sound so superficial. It just depends on the award. But I just thought that it's gonna be quite a really edge cutting design in a way. It's like something refreshing ideas, I would say. Yeah.
It's kind of challenging because the climate in Malaysia,
Yeah.
it doesn't allow us to. It's kind of hard to do when it's without aircon. So we did a lot of thermal analysis and then also the thermal comfort everything, all the analysis. Yeah, and then it's quite challenging. And then we try to minimize the usage of energy. Like let's say, during the daytime, we try not to try to turn on any day.
AC.
I mean artificial light.
Artificial. Okay.
Yeah, so it's all naturally lit in the
Right.
atrium area. Yeah.
Okay. I somehow imagine something quite interesting gonna be happen. I can't wait to see the drawings actually, to see the drawings or visualizations. I think I hope I got it right. I can imagine something, but anyway. So how about like practice? Like, do you plan to expand anytime soon?
Not at this stage because I mean when you kind of hard to choose the project that you like or you wanted
Sure.
to do because actually to be frankly we declined quite a lot of project which even though when it started and when we look at it there's no point doing it and then yeah if it's not working out then we just move on. Yeah, because I remember there's one quote from the Glenn Merton. He say that the future of our life as architect is defined more by the projects we rejected than the project we accept. So yeah, I mean it's small. I don't need a lot of resources for me to sustain. So I still have the choice to do so.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite hard because I remember, I think Kevin McLeod said before, architects need to learn how to say no. Because when you run a practice, it's very hard because you need money to run it. And you can't reject
the small.
Yeah.
That's small.
That's small. Yeah, that's true. If you can't afford, just don't take it.
Yes.
That's quite true.
That's why right now the small and medium sized architecture firm is struggling because they need to be sustainable. That's why they have to take a lot of mass production project, which you can't really say no to it because it's just
their mouth to be fed.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's interesting. That's another topic that we can talk about because I'm actually planning something about business podcasts. Then we can actually talk about that. I mean, a lot of people, that's the thing. That's about reality of the practice. A lot of students just thought that, I come up with a design and a nice rendering, nice drawings. But to run a practice, that's another level where there are so many marketing, social media to engage with the client, to make sure the client happy. To make sure the logistic is there, and then the climate, and then what if I think it's quite rare to happen in Malaysia where people complain, but
Mm.
In here, it's like, wow, you just wanted to add the extension, people will complain, and then the council will take it down. Things like this. it's well, it's different way lah. But thanks a lot, Jeffrey. Really thanks a lot for your time. It's really been a very knowledgeable sharing, and I just thought that, okay, maybe you can share one question. Do you have any open question for our audience, or do you wanted to? Maybe there is a imaginary Jeffrey that you wanted to ask, or you can ask myself.
Okay. Yeah. Let me. It's a general question for everyone, even for us. What change had you bring to our society?
Wow.
I mean, that's a question. And then, I mean, all of us have the ideas of how things can be better. And I think being an architect empowers us and allow us to actually do things that can be so much on our society.
Yeah.
And if you really want to have a better life in your city, then I think you need to be part of the change.
Yeah. I think no matter how small we are changing, and then, however we live the world, it's like the moment I turn on the fan means I'm already consuming electricity and things like this. Yeah. But I mean, it's a very powerful question in a way, however small. Just imagine one house turn on one fan, but let's say 100 houses, 100 fans are running, things like this. Yeah, great. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. I think thanks a lot for your time and spending your evening with us. Wish you all the best, and I'm really keen to talk to you more about other sector as well. I mean, we talk about community sustainability and also business a little bit. I just thought that maybe we can follow up on that. Yeah, I wish you all the best. I really can't wait to see the project, and then hopefully you can share something out, and then let us know. Then we can keep following up and at least see what's bring new to the Malaysian architecture scene as well. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeffrey.
Yeah,
really appreciate
it.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks
a lot. Hope to see you then. Cheers.
Okay. Cheers.